welcome everybody. For the purpose of public record, we do not have Tamisha and Beverly. Beverly is officially Vernier, has joined our task force. I'm probably butchering her last name. But welcome everybody to the April 22nd regular meeting of the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force. I'm going to start by asking for someone to make a motion to approve the minutes from the April 6th regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have Doug. Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? All right, so those minutes are approved. Before we go on, and tonight's meeting can be as long or as short, excuse me, as we feel necessary to move the blueprint down the field, so to speak. And thank you, we're really close. Gina and Sandra are working on their bits and we'll be fleshing those out as we move along. We're very soon going to be at the stage of the blueprint where we're going to need some eyes on it in terms of copy editing. I don't know if that's the right word, but a real editor who can look at it and kind of thread it together and make sense of the pieces, which thanks to the template that Doug and Ryan provided, it's really a much more cohesive, it will be a much more cohesive process because the template is similar and therefore the language is similar. So in that regard, that's going to be really helpful. And there's a lot really good. I don't know, before we get into that though, I think it's been a pretty, I don't even know what the word is. It's been a week. It's been a time generally. And I just wanted to open the floor if anybody had anything that they wanted to say, given the trial of George Floyd happening this week and the verdict. If there's anything else, we had a really intense conversation last meeting with Amy. So before we just kind of dive into the blueprint, I just wanted to offer up the opportunity if anyone had anything that they wanted to share or say or follow up with, anyone from the task force first, and then I'll turn it over to members of the community. I can't see everybody. Let me see. Let's try to get the view. So either by raising your hand or in the chat, if you have something.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been an intense couple of weeks for the Sikh community because of the shooting at the FedEx facility. We lost four members of the community. And from what we understand, it was very much targeted to the Sikh community. So it's like a repetition of Oak Creek for us. So it's been, it's been tough.
I'm sorry for that. Yeah. Sad.
It's interesting how the media picks up on certain stories and overlooks other stories. And that's been rightly or wrongly, but that's the reality. And that's what we live with. So when do you become visible? And when does the pain of anyone be of the same value? When does the killing of anyone have the same value? I mean, that's the question, which obviously right now it doesn't. By the way the media coverage is and by the everything else. So that's been, it's like a constant that you get over. You never get over, but you reach a place and then something like this happens and you're right back. No, nothing has changed. So it's tough. So it's, you know, when your children say, when will we be accepted? The answer is, I don't know. I mean, is any community accepted? That's the question. So is there anybody other than, and it's an awful thing to say, other than a white accepted, or a certain white accepted? So these are tough times, tough conversations within the community, tough conversations, particularly with the young ones, because you know and you try to talk to them that rage is not the thing because of the principles of the faith, and you know it's a constant struggle. But if this is not being met, what do we do? And since there is no the concept or the principle of revenge does not exist in the faith, it makes it that much harder. Which so it's a intense teaching moment, but it's a moment of where all your strength is directed towards healing the community, holding the young ones particularly, because that's where the vulnerability is the most, and the questions are the most.
You actually touched on something that I've been thinking about a lot over the last several weeks, this idea of forgiveness and justice. And what is that, you know, you talk about revenge, does that even make somebody feel better? Like what place does that have? And how does that cycle stop? You know, well, they did it, and I've been thinking about that a lot. And how do you just make peace with it being in the moment and saying, okay, now is the moment, it stops now?
So in the previous cases where there has been, you know, in 2 cases at least, when the verdict was decided guilty and the perpetrator was, the crime wasn't that heinous, but it was enough that there was not a death, but there was pain. And the community, and this happened in New York, and it happened in another region, I can't remember. And they suggested community service for the individual, community service within the community. So the person got to know the 6. And it required a great deal of largeness and heartiness of the community, because the individual had to serve in the place of worship. So he was very much part of the community. But it was that's the way, you know, the justice and at least the community has been dealing with it in that way. That's all I have to offer.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anyone else on the task force that wants to?
I'll just say, and it links to what we're going to work on tonight, that it highlights again just the need for a permanent sort of process, structure, whatever we're going to call it, to bring the town together to talk about these issues and provide opportunities, because I still feel like the community in some ways is looking to us to fill that role, and we're on a path where we're saying, no, we've got to get to this, you know, more formal established role before we can really do that. But there's such a need for ongoing community work. And the town, I know this personally, people are looking to our committee to do that. And we're going to have to sort of like manage the process of saying we can't do it until we can sort of get to this more permanent place.
And it's become clear, right, in the course of these months, which has been part of the point in a way also, that we came to that place, that there is such a need and that people really are looking for it. And so since it's not us, it's really important sooner than later that it's there for, that it's for someone, that it's established.
Yeah.
because these conversations, they need to be happening. I mean, and that was clear too when Amy spoke last week and those kids at the Stop Asian Hate rally, and just having that format and that opportunity and that platform for those kids to share their experiences so that people can recognize the common humanity, that they can see what's happening here, so that when people say, well, what's the metric, what's the proof, it's in these lived experiences. And to be able to have a permanent task force, a permanent committee that can be addressing these issues when any marginalized community is feeling like they don't have a place, so that people are not invisible. Anyone else? Anyone from outside of or from the community? The ad hoc members? All right. I was also just going to recap that from our conversation at the last meeting, Amy is moving forward they're going to really try and flesh out that kind of StoryCorps idea. And so if anyone is interested in speaking to Amy further about how they might be a part of that, it really was just the conversation that happened at our meeting, and it launched, I think it triggered some things. So if you're interested, I'm happy to connect you with Amy, because that's something that I think she wants to dive into a little bit. That would be separate. I think we can get into when I let in my dog, so he stops barking. I think we can then move on, unless someone else has new business, we can move that up. I think we can dive into the business of talking through the blueprint. I don't know, what does the group feel like? Do we want to kind of share the screen? Do we want to just do a little check-in? What will be helpful for people? Because it seems that this is the path we're now on. We're close to kind of a first round, a first draft. We'll be looking to all of you, if you have networks, connections, if anyone here is interested in reading through it and kind of helping with a first round edit to help start shaping it and making it look like something. That's going to be our next step, which is great. And then when we can look at it, we'll take some time and figure out what's still missing. So what do you think? I'm throwing this back out to the group so we can figure out what is the best use of our time at this meeting. Okay. You are a group of strong people, of leaders, of doers, of thought providers. Does anyone want to weigh in? Because then really I'll say we're going to have to figure out, I think we need to leave here with a next step in terms of a process for finding somebody who can really help turn this into a real draft that we can, that's just help it take shape.
Nancy, I'll give my opinion, my 2 cents, my thoughts. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet because it only came in this afternoon and I haven't been at my desk. So I'm just opening it up now. I'm never one to kind of support editing by committee. I just think that there's a lot of, I'm so glad that it is where it is. I think it's fantastic. I love that this team has come together to do this and start to put the framework together, and that Ryan's been point person on that. I just think it's great. I just don't know that we will be productive in a group with the next step. So I feel like what we probably need to do is diverge on our next steps. What are all the things that need to happen from right now until completion, and start to kind of talk through that. What's the vision for how it will get done? How long will things take? Who will do what? It seems like our time should be spent talking about what has to happen I'm not opposed to going through it as a group, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. So it would almost have to be like presented for me to really be able to respond to it as a document.
And
if that makes sense.
since we are the ones to chime in, I'm going to echo what you just said. I am not in favor of sitting here and going line by line, because I think everybody has done their part to date.
Right.
And that has been the assignment. And I think that editing and piecing together is really a different skill and a different interest, and not everybody's interest. So I think, we're all adults. We've all been tasked with a certain piece of this. I think I agree that we should now, let's work backwards. Does everybody think, throw out some ideas? What are people thinking in terms of a deliverable? Is a June 1st date realizable, July 1st, August 1st? Where are people in the terms of having kind of understood where we are? Just
So
what is some of the
Nancy,
thinking?
what is missing? We need to figure out what is missing in the document. There's some red marks. You had so those need to be answered. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, I have a draft of section 4 that you all don't have because it's not done yet.
Right.
But that section, that's definitely one thing that's going to get into this next phase.
Right.
Yeah, could I answer that?
Sure.
The red at the very top of the report, where there's some items like introduction and statement of task force charge, though, as I was collating what everybody wrote, I was just, and as I said in the email, I just kind of was trying to brainstorm a little bit what else might go in that report as a way of leading into the other part of it. And it's very much a draft, and just some thoughts about that, having constructed a lot of strategic plans myself, and just from participating and listening. So and I was just thinking of that too as a jumping off place, to think that I think it needs something like that up at the front, to put some assumptions. I think for anyone reading it who may not even know about the task force, you need to talk about the task force, a little bit about what the process was, so that people know that. And then the summary would be, some way of encapsulating in a narrative. And then what we've already started to do, which is a list of the recommendations up front. So those are already starting to kind of gel. There are overlaps, particularly in section 1 and section 2. So I think whoever, does the editing or the whatever, it's going to have to be with some real concentration in terms of that's not quite that kind of an overlap there. Can we merge these two? Does it belong here, or does it belong, which section does it belong in? Vision, I don't know. I just think a vision statement, is always like an important thing in something like this. Like what do all the recommendations add up? If all of this were done in a town, what would the town, what would it look like? What are you aiming for? And that doesn't have to be pages and pages. It can be pretty concise. And then the other the recommendations are what we've started to work on. And then the appendix is just those other information. And they're all but one of the sections is in. So, and I'm sure if everyone, even going back and looking at your own section, there are probably things that it's worth looking at again and going, oh, okay, wait, let me think how that works. And I know teasing apart, what's a current situation, what's a rationale and things like that. But anyway, so that's what the red is about. And then some people in their report, like I know Doug and I had read ourselves, like, oh, we wanted to add something else here, or a question that we had. So those are just notes from the individual teams.
So Ryan, thank you. How do you envision these reds, which was absolutely fantastic to have put in front? How do you envision, or who do you envision should be writing those? Should it be one voice, or should it be the committee? Because, what is your thought and the other thoughts? I mean, on that, because that's got to be pretty concise.
Mhm.
And I am going with the gut feeling that needs to be that one voice.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, like Karen said, that's not something that's typically done in a committee. It's often done with maybe a couple of people drafting back and forth and then a shared, I mean, there definitely has to be consensus on everything.
Mhm.
And that often, becomes part of the process too of creating a plan.
It certainly feels like at some point, we as a whole group do need to run through an edited version of the recommendations
Oh,
in
absolutely.
some real detail, because the
Yeah.
word is going to be really important. So
And-
I don't think we need to edit it, the first draft and so forth. Let's get that sort of into some form that we're comfortable with, but then we're going to have to go, I think, in a detailed way.
Yeah, and I think too, like working on the overall document and then being able to pull, because they've almost revealed itself, like what those top line recommendation. It's almost like building the checklist after and then highlighting it in a form. And again, a summary, a rationale at the top of it, explaining what the task force is, with the mission statement and backup material and anything that other sources. Maybe it's an opportunity to put in like the reading list that Kathy and I had worked on, and the media list and the definition list and all of that. So we have opportunities there. But I think we're all saying the same thing, that editing by group in this first round, we're not there yet. But I think agreed, we should have a session where, and maybe we break out into groups, but where we really go through this, but it's not there yet.
I mean,
So,
some of the things you could generate ideas if you had somebody that was facilitating, you could generate ideas for a vision statement. You could, generate ideas for what needed to be, included in the assumption section. You could do some of that, not to say that you necessarily would do all the work or write it, as a group, but you
My as facilitator, I think yes, 100%. And that's going to be hard to do since we're not a governing body. It's hard to put a vision statement in place for something that we don't have the key people who would be enacting this blueprint as a part of that process. What we'd be doing is putting together a wish statement and not an actual guiding vision statement. So to have a successful vision statement for any organization, you need the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, to be a part of that process. Perhaps we'd like to invite Brenda to a facilitated session. I'm happy to facilitate that, but I think it should be Brenda and Tom and the rest of us coming up with a vision for what this looks like. So I'm not sure whether we can do that.
but aren't we
This
already
draft and have it have any weight.
Yeah, aren't you already doing that by making all these recommendations? Because you are saying by the recommendations themselves imply that you have a vision of how you want things to be. And I mean, I think you could look at those and I mean, you could almost extrapolate from the recommendations, because in a way we've done it a little bit backwards. I think in planning, you would have a vision. This is where we want it, what we want it to look like. How do we get there? We need to do X, Y, and Z in order to realize the vision of something.
I do think that some of the, and Tamisha's saying here that she agrees with Brian's point. I will say that I feel like when Gina and I crafted that original mission statement,
Yeah.
it is stated there, I mean, broadly. And in a way, it doesn't have to be much more than that. It's this idea that to be what's the quote? And I'm sorry, I'm losing it, but the idea of like, it's not just unless it's just for all kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's there in the mission statement, I think. I mean, I could pull it up if we want to look, but unless Karen, you think that you're talking about something
No, I mean,
else
I
as a
think it's
broader vision.
I think what Ryan's saying, resonates with me. If it's a succinct kind of statement of what we envision, I think that's fine. By definition of a vision statement, I'm just saying if we're going to brainstorm like a vision statement, a guiding mission statement, I don't know that. I
Yeah,
think that's something that the next group should do. But I think we can distill language that's already existing for sure.
yeah.
But I think, could we also maybe put in, rather than the creation of the vision statement, kind of like, these are the things that should be considered in your vision statement. You know what I mean? Like, to kind of give the next group a first project. So these are the things that, should be considered. Like, you should, go through the recommendations and, decide which ones are going to be targeted. Like, give them kind of our vision of what the work of the next task force should be, and maybe it goes in that section.
When I think of a vision statement, and maybe I think it sounds like we're all thinking of different kinds of vision statements. Yeah, I think that's what I'm realizing now. When I'm thinking of a vision statement, I'm thinking of something pretty concise and broad that just is like, we envision Fairfield to be a town where there is just,
Like I'm saying,
and
yeah,
justice for all people, where within, our town structures, budgeting, everything is viewed with a
a
racial
lens of, yeah.
lens. But I mean, like I said, you can almost go back and look at the recommendations and say, oh, why are we wanting this? Because you want this. And that, just a kind of much more global.
That's why I was, the point I was making exactly in a way, like the first paragraph of what the task force charge is.
And maybe it's there, yeah.
And it's just that, we talk about the Constitution and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 guaranteeing equal treatment, and that's what we're looking to.
Yeah. So it probably
just
pull from that too. Yeah.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? Beverly is actually on the call. She's on her daughter's phone, so she's under Kayla, but I just wanted to take a minute, just take a break to introduce Beverly to all of you. Beverly, if you would you like to say hello?
Hello, I am Beverly. I'm sorry. My daughter took my computer, so she has co-opted this computer, and now you're seeing her name on it, and I'm going to have to figure out how to fix that. Yes, I just got sworn in today. It was a wonderful 2-second sworn in session in the hallway with my mask on. But yes, I'm here. Thank you for introducing. And I have not had a chance, obviously, to read any of the information in the documents that you're referring to. And I would definitely love to, when I get, I believe it was sent to me. I'm not sure if it was sent to me as well. And if not, then when I do receive it, I will, I guess, put an input, however you guys want to do that in terms of suggestions and recommendations. And
Do you want to tell everybody a little something about yourself? Not Kayla. I know you, but I don't know if everybody else.
Yeah, I've resided in Fairfield for the last 15 years on Old Post Road. I'm an attorney, but I don't do this type of work that you guys are looking into. But of course, as any attorney, you have to do contracts, and I do civil litigation, primarily defending insurance companies. So yes, I have 2 children in Ludlow High School, and 9th grader and 11th grader. And yes, I was interested in being part of this task force from its inception, but I guess I wasn't that popular enough, so I didn't get a seat at the table. So I'm happy I'm here. Yes, I look forward to working with all of you.
Welcome.
Welcome, and thank you for
Yes.
your patience and for not getting discouraged when you weren't on the original.
And I do want to say I came in late, but is your name Inni? Am I pronouncing it correctly? I can't hear you.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Yes, Inni. And I did not know that this targeted FedEx was in your community. You're right, the media didn't cover that. I mean, if they did, I missed it. It wasn't, broadcasted because of course it's not a controversy. And we as a people, all of us have to work together to make this a safer place for everyone, because I think it's going to be more targeting. It's not going to be the end. I think it's just the beginning. And so I don't know if you're part of a larger community in terms of how they're going about ensuring the safety of your community, you know, the people in your community, and especially was this in Indiana?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're a little far removed in terms of proximity. So, I mean, obviously you have the internet now, and a lot of organizations are communicating via this method, Zoom, and so I don't know if that's, but obviously you'll reach out to the group and let us know what, if anything, we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Do you want me to say anything else? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot,
Oh, no, it's
but I
okay.
just wanted everybody to get a chance to meet you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of, you know, next actionable steps, what are we thinking we want to do next for the draft? I think the question of how we're going to get this document edited is probably the largest question that we have to ask, because someone has to do it. So maybe we can kind of brainstorm how that could work. Anybody have any ideas of who we could approach, or how we could, anyone that they think that they know of that they could tap into? Or
Is this the kind of thing, like, I mean, obviously with a student at Fairfield U or Sacred Heart, maybe it's like late in the game, but I'm thinking about the woman that maybe I was thinking about the woman, Gabrielle, who came, who was studying for her PhD. Maybe she knows a doctoral student who is willing to kind of help us, you know, what.
Yeah, didn't Karen volunteer to help? Karen, not to put you on the spot, and I think I had raised my hand too, that I would help as well.
Yeah, I said, yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm happy to kind of, you know, proofread, add some content for sure. But I think yes, and so yes, happy to do an iterative step. But I think if we're talking about the same thing, we're also thinking about the final document and what it looks like. You know, it's this idea of are we going to just present kind of a PDF of a Word document, or are we going to present something that has a little bit more panache to it? And I don't know if we've ever gotten through that step, but something that's more graphically laid out, like some of the other blueprints that came our way in the last several months that we shared out, that have color and that have iconography and
that piece I feel more comfortable in like helping. I know somebody who is a designer and can work with us. I think
that's
a
presentation tool. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a presentation, and that part I feel like in some ways is like the fun, because it's like the dressing, the icing. And Dan, I see your hand raised. Where I think we need to go first, and yes, I think we all agree it has to be something that people want to look at and looks nice and is not, you know, it has a nice quality to it, so that people just don't look at it and see words on a page. But I do think that it's an important step for someone who's really a writer, who really understands this work, who can put some pieces together, help us make links, or ask us the questions of what's missing. You know, hey, there's a hole here, and kind of help us tell the story with, you know, sewing it together. And I think that's a real skill. And not to say, Karen or Ryan, you don't have it. And Ryan, you've done yeoman's work. Like, you've been incredible to do all this. So thank you again. But I think if we could all have a think on, do we know somebody who, again, and that's why I thought of Gabrielle, maybe she has a network, you know, of someone who's.
I've worked with, over the years, probably 25 college students as volunteers. And I can tell you, this is not a job that a college student you could hand over and say, do this.
No, she's not a college student.
But I'm saying, we're talking about reaching out to Fairfield U.
I meant as a graduate student. I was talking graduate school. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, and it has to be, I mean, I think the thing that the task force has going for them in terms of doing this work, and I know it seems really daunting when you look at the 27 pages or whatever that it already is, but you know, it's the group itself that really has the background and of where it's headed. And not to say that there can't be somebody that, you know, looks at it with fresh eyes when you get it to a certain point and goes like, oh, wait a minute, this is not making sense, or that doesn't seem connected or whatever. But I don't know, that's just my.
Well, the way I see it is I think there's a few things that need to pop into here, as you know, as we just discussed. You know, some of the missing pieces have to get into it. And then, you know, Ryan, you and I could probably have a couple back and forths, just the two of us, with our brain power on it, and that will get it to a next level. But my gut tells me that it's not a college student, maybe it's a graduate student, but somebody who has a lot of experience writing this type of document and the semantics and the language. I don't want to get it wrong in terms of the right way to say something. Like, I wish we could find somebody with experience reviewing a document of this nature for us before we then commit to the graphic fun part of it. Like, I feel like there's a middle.
Is this an opportunity for us to tap into the CCM equity coaching?
Exactly. Maybe it's the CCM. Yeah.
Because they, you know, we do have like some hours that can be used that the sustainability task force has offered us.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be a good next step to kind of do what you're talking about, Karen, which is kind of get it to like a point, and then bring in their coach to kind of sit down and say, okay, this is where we are. How do other towns go from this to that?
Yeah.
And you know, bring in their expertise for the bridge.
It's a great idea. Should we ask the question now though and say, how do we do that? Do you want me to reach out to Erin or Emma,
Mary?
rather, Emma and
Yeah,
Sean,
Emma.
or Emma?
Yeah, let's
It's
reach out to Emma and Sean
Busy.
and
Okay.
and see, because I know that they have the connection. I think Sean did it once before.
Yeah.
So she may know the exact person that we can go to.
Okay, so I have my homework. Speaking of homework, I want to digress a little bit to tell you something exciting if you guys hadn't followed this story.
Wait, wasn't Dan going to say something?
Oh, sorry, Dan. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, it's nice to be with you. I was just
Thank
going
you,
to
Karen.
suggest, and I don't know how much you want this on the outside, but you know, Amy may remember this. One of the women we spoke to, I think her name is Lori, at the Fairfield Museum, had offered to review drafts of the plan, and she's done some extensive work in this area. So she would be a set of fresh eyes, and could, you know, has experience and could lend some insight. So just wanted to offer that up.
It's the one that speaks the quietest, that is the loudest with the best ideas. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan,
I-
for remembering. You're right. She did offer. She was very kind.
Yeah.
I love that idea because it's a community engagement. It's somebody who has the historic knowledge and presumably the skill set. What do you think? Should we? I'm just getting a sense of the body here. What do you think? Does that seem like a good, having Lori weigh in on that draft? I see Sandra nodding, and
Yeah, I would say if we could get, you know, step one might be Ryan and I, you know, and maybe even Gina. She said she was adding some stuff, but maybe, you know, the three of us get it to a level, and then get it to coaching or talk to the coaching about it. So that's two perhaps, and then there's probably going to be another round of looking at it, and then we get it to the museum, the woman from museum. So I just feel like there's some incremental steps there, but maybe that's the right flow of what happens next.
Yeah.
okay, so we'll go down parallel paths. Kathy, we'll go down parallel paths. I will, you and Karen, you and Ryan will kind of take a stab. I will talk to Emma and Sean, and then we can go to Lori. Sorry, Kathy wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to echo what Karen said, but also just some of it is just semantics, like because different ones of us worked on this. Some of the language isn't consistent. Some of the things that we call the permanent task force is different. I mean, just those things need to be all made the same, because somebody from the outside, like the museum looking at it, they're going to be like, wait. So now this group wants a task force, and this group wants a commission, and this group wants something else. Like, just all of that needs to be one voice. One.
Right.
So I think that's the step you're talking about, right, Karen?
Yeah, and I think that we can do, between Ryan and myself, we can do a pretty, good job about that. It's the next steps, which I guess I wouldn't want that to be the end of the road for the developmental editing part of it. Like, that to me makes me terrified that I'm going to get it semantically wrong, or, it's like, I don't know, it's too big to not have several iterations.
Right.
In
Right, I think
development.
we have to get it consistently wrong, so then we can submit it to be.
I don't want to be consistently wrong.
But your job would be to get it consistent, and then if we need to.
Full disclosure, the editing is going to be happening with these two white women. And, the last thing I want to do is something that I'm overlooking because I'm ignorant. That would be a terrible injustice to all.
The thing that we have going is that we worked directly off of a model.
Yeah.
Everybody was working directly off of a model that has been put out there. I mean, it's not, because, so the structure is there. I think a very concrete structure outline for it.
Yeah.
It's not like everybody was completely all over the place. And then, yeah.
And Gina, you're doing the executive summary part of it. You have that started?
Yeah, well, I was working on a section, but the other thing that I was doing as I was working on my piece was actually, I came in and working off the whole document. So that's actually what's kind of slowed me up, because I've been trying to get my piece to fit with all of it. So I'm totally hearing what you're saying about how it's, I was kind of trying to keep an eye to not being repetitive and making sure that I was covering things.
Yeah. And you're
so I mean, I'll definitely be in on, with you
I
two
was going to say, we can
on
work
that part.
together pretty efficiently to get it to that next step, whatever, whenever that can happen.
So again, I think in talking about it in terms of like phases, iteration phase, this was phase 1, which is completed. Now phase 2 is going to be kind of just taking it all and making it, as Doug said, consistently wrong.
Yeah.
And then, the next phase, I'm thinking that the next phase can be the CCM coaching, because that's going to really be bringing in, is there something that we overlooked? Is there something that, because they have experience with the other ones that look just like it. And then the last phase is then going to the Kathy, that's what you said, right? The woman from the museum, to really kind of say, okay, now we've kind of taken it through this process. It's ready to, to be beautified. And we're going to go into this next step. And again, along the way, each phase is going to be.
Is the museum woman the beautifier, or is the museum woman the?
I think she's still meat. She's still content.
meat.
So at each phase, my hope is that each phase there's going to be corrections that are made based on, the pool of knowledge that these people are bringing in, but bringing them in sort of one step at a time, and having these like consistent drafts,
right?
So that, we can always go back and look and say, okay, well, that was a change that we made back then. Why did we change it from back then? So it kind of gives us a little bit more of those other eyes that we're looking for.
And it would make sense probably if we along the way could come up with a few other stakeholder type people to take a look at it too.
Well, and Ryan, I was going to dovetailing on what you just said, because I think so too, because when we've brought it, we could also then bring somebody in to help with like visual cues and backup and supporting documents that exist that we can help flesh it out, that become appendix. And that's not just making it pretty, that's kind of getting to collecting some of these things that, I've been holding on to, but, copies of the land use records and some of the charts that Steve has sent me over the years. And Jamie, you just put something in the chat, and sort of piecing in some of that stuff and figuring out where that goes in based on a comprehensive review. So like, that's even a phase before it gets, I think that we're marching closer, but let's also remember that it's okay to take some time. I know we're up against time because people really are looking to us, but we kind of get one shot. So let's make sure we get this right.
Well, I think the important thing of like kind of having these sort of phased drafts is, you know, a camel is a horse that was made by committee, right? Like you don't want to get like so much drift by having so many different opinions. And so I think being really, you know, strategic about like what a draft is, when a draft is finished, when it is time to take it to another person or another level will help keep that drift from happening.
With that, oh, go ahead, Kathy.
I was just going to say, adding on to what Gina's saying and giving each subsequent person who looks at it a specific mission. Like when you look at it, please look at it for X, not just look at this and give us your edits. Just, we only want you to answer this question. Does it present X in a Y fashion or whatever it is, you know, like direct the person who's doing the editing so that they don't go through the whole thing and then change it all around.
And then perhaps inviting that person to the meeting so that they can talk through some of their findings and what their recommendations are, so that we're also doing it, sharing it with the larger group, so that, you know, for this next phase, Karen and Ryan are taking ownership. Gina's going to work with them, but, you know, maybe it's like presenting to the group, sharing it in advance of the next meeting, if you think that's reasonable, but kind of talking through your process at the next meeting, for instance.
And definitely something that I would like to see before the end of the current iteration is to maybe have some of our legal minds, like Kathy and Beverly, take a look at it before we even take it to the next phase, right? Because I don't want to run into another incidence of where we're brushing up against the charter and against state law. So before we even take it to the next level, I would like that's phase 2.5, where, you know, once we get it to kind of where it's in our consistency wrong, I would love, and I don't mean to volunteer you, but if you know, those of you who, you know, understand that world better can take a look at it, at that draft, and just exactly what you're saying, Kathy. Can you look at this? Did we forget anything? Are we violating any laws with anything that's in here? Is there anything that can't be done? And then we can take that to the next phase.
Yeah, because I think that's super important. You know, Brenda was very clear that she can't wait to see what we put in front of her, and so she can decide if she can vote on it. I mean, there's a chance she's going to vote down the blueprint. There's also a chance she will approve the blueprint, but I think we all need to be really as careful as we can be that we get it right.
Well, and to be clear, approving the blueprint does not necessarily mean adopting all the recommendations.
Right.
So I would not feel concerned that she won't, you know, accept it and adopt it as as the recommendations. I feel very certain that she would be open to it, actually,
Okay, good.
and will accept it. Now, what then subsequently happens is another discussion, but and each item, I imagine, is going to be up for public debate. To me, in some ways, the singular recommendation that is the most important is hiring a permanent person to oversee this, so that there is accountability, so that all the steps, so that they can take our recommendations and work from that. So in some ways, what I would like to see above all else is we need a person committed to this work period. That is for me. So that is something, you know, I will fight to have as a top recommendation. Again, I believe the blueprint will be accepted and taken in. What is done with it will be up for scrutiny and discussion. I also think that, to Gina, your point, we have resources, and maybe CCM will help us do this, but there are resources at the state that can help look and see, like, are there things that are violating state law? There's a legislative team that we could probably run this through. So together with the legal minds here and someone who may be an expert on this, and maybe CCM can advise us. But I know in the case of other work I've done that they've been able to advise. So that could be a resource as well. Sustainable Connecticut, the equity coaches, that's, I think what we're saying, Jason, if we all agree, is that this first pass, while Brian and Karen and Gina are working to make it consistent, And we're going to talk to the sustainable team, that's Sean and Emma, who we referred to get those coaches to help us. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's what I was asking. I thought somebody said CCM and I was getting confused if it was
I did say
CCM
CCM.
or
I said
sustainable
CCM.
CT. Got it.
Thank
That
you.
was
I
it.
said CCM, but I meant the coaches.
Okay, that was it.
And by the way, I'm sure CCM could also be a resource. We could go back to them, but I think we need to be focused in our approach. So are we going to take this kind of in a stepwise process, understanding that the bigger picture, are kind of the 4 phases we've laid out, but in terms of timing and what we commit to, kind of what's in front of us, do you want to do it in smaller bite-sized chunks, like knowing that the next time we meet, is there homework for the broader group? Other than the few of us who've already said that there is a next step, what are we thinking? Yeah, Kathy.
Maybe the homework for the group could be reading through the whole document and just identifying what has not been addressed, if we're missing stuff. Like, so you don't read it for consistency necessarily, because that's what Gina and Karen are going to be working on with Ryan, but maybe we read it through to say, where are the holes? Like, wait, did we address, putting on educational programs for the town? Or did we just sort of reading it through to see if there are any big missing pieces?
So does someone want to be the keeper of that? Gina, does it make sense for you, Karen, or Ryan to do that?
I think that's fine. I think you can send those to me because I can incorporate that on my end. So if you see something that you think is a glaring omission, just let me know.
There were some other areas that had gotten enumerated. I remember in one of the minutes about, I know arts and culture was one, and there were a couple of others that don't show up in here in any way. I know there are people in town that are interested in that particularly. I was speaking to someone who, was talking about the arts, but they were talking about it also in an intersectional way with racial equity too, in that role. So, and I can't remember right now without pulling it up, but I can go back and look at that and see from the, or somebody can from the minutes. I think, Nancy, you had kind of said, oh,
Yep.
Don't forget this, this, and this also.
Yep.
So maybe that can also be added to the draft as in red to explore a little bit.
Yeah, and those are the kinds of things that, like, I can put in writing because arts and culture for sure. And I did take notes from that in terms of what we thought. We had talked about small business and we had talked about other things that I think do make their way a little bit in it, but not necessarily. So does anyone have, I didn't pull it up, what our next meeting date?
I'm on there right now. It is May 4th.
Any Star Wars fans out there? Thank you for laughing. Thank you. So May 4th, what are we thinking? Karen, Ryan, and Gina, I think we defer to you a little bit right now.
I'd love to get some, there'll be something by then. Like, I think we can.
Yeah, I
look
think
for
that we could probably finish ours. And did Kathy and Bev say yes, they'll look at it with that legal lens, or did they not say yes?
Hi, yes, I will definitely do that. I apologize.
Okay.
And Kathy,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I can do it too. I don't want us to be bootstrapped though. I don't want us to bootstrap ourselves because there may be things that are going to have to change in town government in order to facilitate some of this. But I don't want to say, oh, well, the town's not set up to do it that way, so we better not recommend it.
That's exactly why I want you to look at it before we actually go to the town attorney, because that's the kind of thing that you can say, yes, this is against state statute, but it is not against the town charter. And since the town charter is about to be changed, this is something that the town charter could change. So that's kind of where, you know, I mean, we're obviously gonna have to run the whole thing by him at the end, but I don't think that that's worth doing until we've kind of, it's in a position where we can actually say, we're presenting this to you to look at as a whole. So I think it'd be helpful to kind of have you, you know, do that pre-vetting. And then, and even like to highlight, these are the points right here. We understand that these, you know, that these things fit state statutes, but don't fit town statutes, or these do, or we, you know, we had a question about this, we ran it through. So I think that's where, you know, your background and expertise really can come in handy to really look at it and to kind of take it through that lens and to let us know exactly what you're saying. Is it
It's a
something that,
knowingness.
yeah, so it's letting us have the information about, yes, this is something that we're presenting that is going to involve an actual change to the charter, but and especially because there is a charter review that is about to happen, that's not out of the range of something that we could suggest, right?
And by the way, this whole idea of like, because it's been done since 1930, because it's been codified that way, we appreciate that, but that's the problem, right? And it's
Right.
just a recognizing and a knowingness, I don't know if that's a word, and an awareness, so we can say, yes, we appreciate that as it stands, it's a violation, but to, you know, to what we're saying, that's exactly.
But I think
why
even
it's
further
here.
than that, you know, it's saying that, you know, sometimes it's yes, it's a violation, but sometimes it is, you know, it is a violation that stands for no reason, and that there are these other statutes that say this is something that you can do. So sometimes it's about presenting them with, I know that's how you've done it, but according to the state, this is possible, or according to federal statutes, this is possible. So that's kind of you know, what I'm looking toward.
Right.
And then also at that point, at the same point, when it is in a state that we are presenting it to the town attorney, I would like you to still be part of that process. And the conversation should be between him and you. Like, we as a group have put it into a place where we think it's something that can be adopted, and then he's going to look at it through the legal eyes. And then I would love for him to, you know, you all to hash it out, because you've got, you know, you're speaking the same language, and that, I feel like that'll help us avoid the pitfalls that we've had before.
Except for, I have a question. I mean, is it a problem to have things that as they exist, and I'm asking as devil's advocate here, is it a problem to put things in that may not be?
Yeah, Nancy, I think what you're not understanding is, I don't think that that's a problem. I just think that I would rather have Kathy and Jim argue about it, because they are speaking the same language.
Yeah. I see. Yeah.
But Nancy, you seem to have a concern. So what was your question?
No, I just don't want us to like legalese our way out of making recommendations or getting caught up in the fight or the discussion about it, because I think that, you know, as we were saying, when the administration receives this document, they're going to get to decide what works, and it's kind of like at that point is when the arguing and the public discussion, because presumably this will be seen in the light of day and shared with the public, and there to get public input on it. So I just would hate for us to get so sort of like caught up in that. And I know what you're saying about let them have the discussion. It's just being informed. It's presenting something that's informed, to your point.
I think the last time when we got caught up, you know, there was a question as to, there was a question on both sides that, you know, not everybody agreed with, but there was an interpretation. And I'm not in a position to make a legal interpretation of anything. Kathy is, and so's Beverly. So
right.
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying we make the presentation, and if there are questions about their interpretation, I think it's a good idea to have them talk about it. And because they understand things in a way that we don't. So that's why I think that has to be part of the final process. It may be what pushes things through. It may be that, you know, because we vetted all these things, and maybe, you know, there are questions from the town attorney, and they can, and, you know, we can say, we've thought about these things, and this is why we thought that this is why we say that this is okay. But not that it's just something that we thought of as a committee, but it was that Kathy and
Yep.
Bev have looked at it as attorneys and said, these are, I mean, we're, the odds of us suggesting something that is illegal are fairly low. It's not about things being illegal. It's always about the interpretation.
Right,
And so we want to make sure that we are, solid in our interpretations.
right.
I really feel like we're not, I mean, I think it makes sense to run it through and try to filter out anything like egregious, but we're making recommendations. Here's a problem. We've identified this problem. This is what we're recommending. The permanent person, commission, whatever, and the town government are responsible for, figuring out what the obstacles are to getting that done.
Doug,
Yes,
that's what
but-
I'm saying.
Yeah.
But
I
yes,
guess-
I hear your
I
point.
guess what
though,
I'm saying is we got smacked in the face
I hear
for
you.
violating
know.
town ordinance.
I-
That is, we have to avoid that.
as much as
plain
we
as I
can.
can say it.
Yeah,
right?
as much as we can.
The same time, like we didn't think we were doing anything that violated the town charter before, and we were told that we did. I want to avoid that problem by having people who know the law and know the charter filter it. That's my point.
Fair enough.
And everything is
Copy.
subject to interpretation.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. Copy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was being challenging.
Okay.
May 4th, you'll have something. I will have talked to Emma. Everyone here will by then, please, and giving enough time. I mean, so if you could spend the next week then reading and making your recommendations so that it gives Gina and Karen and Ryan at least that time to Karen, what do we say? Is this something I should share?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just put it in the chat. I just can't share because I'm not presenter, but I need to have a visual of action steps when we get to this level of implementation. So, or of, development. So I just threw this in there to be clear in my mind. Can we just look at it and make sure we
Yeah.
all agree that this is the process we're about to undertake?
Oh my God, I love order and presentations, and I'm just waiting for my computer to open. Yes,
I mean, it's not pretty. It's just thrown on.
I mean,
Where is this, Karen?
I'm trying to share it.
Put
It's
it
in
in
the
the chat.
chat, but here I'm gonna screen share if it opens, but it's verifying. I don't know what it did. Let's see.
The chat.
No, I'm trying, it's not opening for some reason, so I'm just,
Maybe it's PowerPoint. I mean, I don't know if Gina's a co-presenter or whatever. It's in the chat. So, I mean, anybody can look at it in the chat. It's
here, let me see if I can, here, I'm letting you, it's letting you screen share. Can you share now?
yeah, hold on.
That's an easier way to do it.
Yeah, hold on. Let me just open it up. Yeah, do you see it now?
Yes.
Again, it's nothing fancy. I just want to make sure we're all, like, everybody knows what's going on, because this is, just want to make sure I'm clear.
I think, let's see. Is my audio still on?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think when you think of sending it to a graphic designer, there are two kind of parts to that. One is, just actually making the document look better. But there's also what you were talking about earlier of a more concise way of a PowerPoint presentation or something like that, that is the way that it could be presented in whatever situation that needs to be done. Just something that doesn't necessarily have all the, background information and the appendix and all that kind of stuff, but something that is more concise and that can be digested more easily in different situations. The other thing that Doug and I talked a little bit about was also thinking somewhere a little bit farther down the line about how to present it and how that it gets into the press and how to frame and create, so that you control the narrative around it. And I don't know if there are any like public relations people or whatever, but I think just from,
Well,
that would be helpful too, to think about that.
Well, we will have an opportunity to present. This group will have an opportunity to present. And remember, we're welcome to to ask to present to the Board of Selectmen at any time. That was told to us in terms of if we had things to share. So if there's a message we want to share in advance, but out of the gate, we will be presenting. We can also write a press release.
That's what I'm talking about. If you
You
have.
could put it,
Well,
yeah,
I think if we're going to add,
Yeah.
like, we don't have to make those decisions now, but I think that would be, you know, the phase after the sending to the graphic designer. If we added another one of those little arrows, Karen, it would be, you know, to finalize, you know, what the presentation is going to be. I mean, that's something that, you know, when we know what we have, we can kind of then look at it and say, okay, we're, you know,
what's the
and at any
rollout
point in
plan?
time, because we have a lot of meetings between when we get to that last point, we can, you know, that's a conversation that we can continue, but that's, you know, the target is that's going to be done. You know, I don't know if we want to do that right before we send it to the graphic designer, after, probably, the way my mind works, it's after, but people might have another idea. And so that would be the next little arrow that would be lesser gray.
I just put it in the next steps
And-
down here.
Yeah.
And for
just
me,
'cause
this is
it's
how
gonna
my
get too long and hard to read.
But you know, for me, that's my brain. Like that's the event brain. That's how you take the thing and make it a happening and all the fanfare around it. And how we amplify it and how we use our networks and the people that we've talked to. You know, there may be a phase where we want to go back to the stakeholders that we've talked to and say, read this. Does this fairly represent, you know, our conversations and what your idea was? And, you know, the head of human resources in town had real thoughts about this. Like, do we want them to weigh in before, you know, is there that phase where it's communicating this with the stakeholders and the participants in the deep listening and going back and saying, okay. So just a thought there, but I think it sounds like, and this is a beautiful visual. If you could share this with me, Karen, so we can
Yeah,
put it in
I'll
our
send it via email when we're done, but
backup. Yeah.
who are we still waiting on a section from, just so I have that?
Sandra and Gina.
Oh, okay, Gina's on that one too. Okay.
But it's a work in progress, so it's
Yep.
not.
So I think that what we can probably say by the next meeting, can everybody, like, looking at the sort of second step here, that read what's there, see if there's anything missing. We can, you know, if we get that one missing section in there, people can take a look at that. Can that happen? And while we're working, if those things can happen concurrently, then by the next meeting, hopefully, we've gotten that feedback and we've taken a pass at the consistency. And then maybe at that point, you know, that's when we'll be ready for, you know, kind of Kathy and Bev to take a look at it. So, you know, again, a lot of this stuff can happen offline. It doesn't have to happen at the meeting, but my guess is between now and the next meeting, that's what everybody can be involved in, you know. Gina, Ryan, and I doing some sleeve roll up, getting it done. Everybody else taking a look with their, you know, with their eyes to see what's missing. Does that sound doable before the next meeting?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Mhm.
And then maybe concurrently, Nancy, can you find out about the Sustainable Connecticut coaches and the Fairfield Museum people and see if we can line them up for May? Oh, Nancy, you're muted, I think.
Sorry. Yeah, I would think probably not the next meeting, but the meeting after, or, you know.
Well, I would think
right?
ask them if they're willing, so that
Okay.
you can report back to us at the next meeting whether they're willing. Because
Okay.
right now it's like we think we can, but can we? So if you can find out if they'll be ready to do that for us, then after the next meeting, we can then say, let's implement that stuff, or let's get that stuff done and set up those meetings. And I don't know whether, you know, whether like with the equity coaches, who's involved in that? Is everybody on that phone? That feels overwhelming, but maybe, maybe one or two people on the task force want to be on that coaching call or something to go through it. So I don't know how that all plays out, but maybe we can discuss that at our next meeting, what those subsequent steps would look like. Same with the
Yeah,
woman at
maybe.
the History Museum.
Yeah. And
What would her
maybe,
help look like?
and again, to reiterate, when we had asked at the FOIA meeting, all of this draft work it's completely above board to do some of this behind the scenes. So
Right.
that's why we can do this in small breakout groups. So I will share what I learned with the sustainable team and the coaching, what they may be able to offer. Doug is saying, when we talk to sustainable Fairfield folks to take a look at their recently developed strategic plan. Agree. Because she was looking to get similar recommendations. Yes, I think we've all heard that. And the strategic plan and the sustainable Fairfield group both have done, really good jobs. So definitely I would add that to the homework. If everybody could take a look at both the strategic plan and the sustainable Fairfield plans, they're really good templates for what I think the expectation is, anyway, to Doug's point.
And where are
Dan,
they?
will you reach
They're
out
online,
to-
online.
Sorry, Dan, will you reach out to Tina?
Yeah, Lori Pasternak.
Yeah.
Pastor Yak, I mean, it's her.
Okay.
Yeah, I can reach out to her.
I just want everyone to know that the next 7 weeks are very, very extraordinarily busy work time for me. I will be here, but just know that I'm juggling that. So I just wanted to share that. It's like my tax season in the event space.
Exciting. A lot of that's happening outside this year, huh?
Yes, it is.
That's why.
Thus the importance of the arts in what we're talking about. The arts heal, they bring communities together. I am very much looking forward to getting back out and being able to have a live Tribeca Film Festival. Of which there will be a day celebrating Juneteenth on June 19th, which the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force, I hope, will take a group field trip. You've heard it here. Various events and whatnot. I'm doing some self-promoting. Any questions? Everyone feel good about the next steps? Karen, thank you for that beautiful visual.
It was hardly beautiful, but you're
Gorgeous.
right.
I love it.
Just I need to see it laid out. That's all.
Can I just, this is just a nagging detail for my last comment, but I did get some sense from my internal source with the sustainable people, namely my wife. That Brenda seems to have some expectation that we're going to be presenting some budget implications in this, which is far from what we've talked about, and I don't think anywhere near what our charge had been. And I don't know if there's any way to clear up that expectation or clarify whether that's really what they're expecting us to deliver.
Based on what, Doug? I'm curious, because that hasn't been part of, I mean, I think that when we recommend a permanent,
Okay, I mean,
but there are implications, but is it our job to,
I don't think so.
I mean, I'm asking the group.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it our job to talk about what those implications might be?
Like line iteming of the current budget, and I'm not sure I understand what the expectation is. Or is it because from what I can see, just skimming this, what's here is it's in there's references to the budget in there, or to the budgeting process. That somebody included that in one of their sections.
Do you mean the cost associated with executing on some of these ideas?
I believe that, and I was led to believe that she actually had some expectation that we'd be making some comment on what racial issues cost the town of Fairfield.
Oh, that kind of budget.
Yeah.
Ah,
Why would we Why would we do that?
don't know. I don't know why. I mean, I'm just saying that
Yeah.
is like,
I would steer away. My
Where in the
recommendation,
world
yeah.
would we even get that data?
I think that goes back to the concept that we've been discussing from the beginning, that there are those people who believe that this task force is out to prove whether or not there is a problem
is a cost.
and
Yeah,
quantify.
and that's just not, I don't think that's the business that, you can't slide that in later.
Yeah,
Like,
I think
if
that's
that
where
was
that's
the,
coming.
if that's what you wanted us to do, that's what you should have told us to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it is it so that people can say we can't afford this work? Like, that's
And,
Well,
and
maybe-
also,
Or
I
am I
think,
understanding what you're saying differently? Or are you saying these are our recommendations and it's going to cost the town $75,000 a year to hire a person and it's going to cost the town to execute on this? Or are you saying what has been the cost to the town and not doing it will yield that? So it's two different things. So are we all?
It is two different things,
I
yes.
agree, it's two different
But
things.
this is also just, I don't want to say hypothetical, but this is, I don't, is it hearsay, Doug? Like Brenda hasn't said this
No,
directly to us, so
No, it's.
are we
Right,
speculating?
I'm bringing it up just to highlight the issue of, we're trying to deliver something that meets our expectations about what needs to be delivered. And I think there's always been this lingering concern that that what we're working on is maybe not what they're looking for. And I just wanted to get out ahead of that as a potential issue that we.
I mean, I think, I'm happy to address that in the executive summary, how damaging that approach is, that asking, what the data shows about asking people to prove that. And, we're talking about human costs here, and they are not quantifiable. And so if we're only looking at, I mean, we could definitely add in language around that to address it. And I think, Doug, I like the way you're thinking about it, because I'm thinking about, writing an APA format. And if I were writing a paper, I would have to write, the possible negative implications, like what are the possible negatives here? And I think, you have a point in saying, if it's right in there, then we've considered it, we've thought about it, here's our answer to those things. So I don't think that that's necessarily a bad idea. But also, it's just not the kind of thing that, I mean, it is what has historically prevented racial equity work from moving forward. Historically has been, prove it to me. And because I don't experience it, and you can't prove it to me, it doesn't exist. And so I think, we can talk about that.
And if it's
lead with that, lead with that in the opening section.
And if it's this idea of this is what it will cost to implement on these programs, I also recommend we don't really go there, because that's a decision that any administration gets to make about where this fits in as a priority. And I don't want to, in the same way that I was saying, I don't want to like legalese our way out of making recommendations, I would say the same thing. I don't want the possible budget implications to get in the way of what we're recommending, because they're really separate. What any administration decides to do, that will be on them and how it's funded. And while we can be part of those discussions, I don't think necessarily we should say, oh, well, that's going to be too expensive, we shouldn't recommend that, or there hasn't been historic precedence for this. So I think we make the recommendations in a kind of blind, not a blind way, but a need blind way, and then, or a budget blind way. And then that would be my recommendation.
Does anybody have any experience having done this on a different kind of task force? Like, is it customary that at the end you present your recommendations and you also have and it's likely to cost X amount? Or no? Nobody
So
has.
it's almost like two different, it's in a way, it's sort of why even the town structure is set up the way it is. You have the legislative body, you have the executive body, and you have people saying yes or no, you can pay for it. I mean, I almost look at it similarly.
Mhm.
I actually think,
But
Kathy,
the-
when we look at the sustainable Fairfield strategic plan, we might get an answer to that, because I believe they probably did bake in some projections on if you don't build, berms, you don't do this, these are the implications for town, which is a little easier to analyze, I think, than what we're trying to analyze.
Yeah, no, I meant from the perspective of like, the school board basically goes to the town, right? And says, we need this amount of money. The superintendent, they form a budget and they say, this is how much we need to run the school this year. And then the town decides whether or not they're going to approve it. So we're going with a plan, but we're not saying, and this is how much it's going to cost.
We're going with the recommendations for a plan.
For recommendations.
We're not
okay.
going for the, it would be up to the next permanent group,
Got
so to speak. I would think. I mean, ours is not to censor in that way, in one direction or the other. Like, the idea is, this is what we found, and based on these findings, this is what we're recommending. Not, this is what we found, this is how much it costs. It's like, this is the unfiltered view of what we've found.
But again, you put it in under sort of implications and considerations, budgets, the budgeting process needs to be amended to add in funds for this position. Those can be like to get ahead of what the possible concerns are, is by, we could just put in an implications section of, and hopefully address some of those things. And, because having a section like that means that even in the processes of when we're showing it to people and someone says, well, you can't do that because of X, like, okay, well, we can just put that in the implication section. We recognize that this, you may have a problem with that for this reason, but these are the implications. We understand that this might be an area for you. Here's some suggestions, but that could be just another way of, because you don't want to, we don't want to not suggest things because they haven't been done, but also we want to recognize that, if the glaring question is there a problem? I cannot help but to believe that anybody that doesn't see that there is a problem, I don't know that this document's going to change anything for them. They're not waiting for a document to come in and explain it to them.
Mhm.
So,
And further, I think the idea is, if there is a commitment long-term, there are ways in which we don't even begin to know about funding things, for instance. Are there programs? And I think that, we're not so in the weeds on the how and some of the implementation, although we are recommending in some cases, but so. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
A question. In this proposal, we as a task force, do we recommend who to hire or where to go about looking for qualified persons, or is it determined essentially by the select woman? How does that go about? If you're making suggestions with this proposal, who determines who should be in charge of this now task force? Is that?
there's one of those implications, Beverly.
Okay. Again, I'm not privy to any of the stuff that you've done so far. So I don't know if you guys have determined that, because it seems as if you're now leaving it up to the select woman and or Bill. And I'm not sure, frankly, those two alone should be the ones
Except
involved
for-
in making that decision.
And this is why I go back to this idea of, it's interesting to think about or conceive of like an inclusion officer, or somebody who's overseeing that role, who works with the administration. I mean, to me, that is an interesting recommendation for that reason, that it's not just about one administration, but it's a line item.
Right.
But
I just
again,
don't want all the work to be for naught and then.
adapting the
just end up-
recommendations to
Right.
qualifications of that person. We
Okay.
can't say who that person should be,
Of course not.
but we
Right.
can say what kind of qualifications you should look for in the person, which will help narrow
Correct.
that field at the very least. And then it's something to be held accountable to, right? Like when the hire happens, we made the recommendations of what kind of person, you know, best practices says it should be. And then, you know, you have to answer the question about that.
And
I
if
think that's kind of the limit of what we can do.
and if we'll be involved in determining who would be in that position, whether or not we'll be involved in that process. It's kind of like going back to when I initially came on, when you were looking at the police commissioner and how we basically found out that you really don't have a lot of power, right? Your power is just to give a blueprint and then they determine if they're going to consider anything that you write, essentially. And so now, because of the limitations, I guess now I'm part of the we've determined that we're very restricted. And now we have to recommend a permanent position or permanent force because it's beyond our responsibility, right? Because we're not given any real responsibility in terms of what we can do to affect change. We're just there to tell her, hey, this is what we think you should do, and then that's it. We don't have any other chance to implement anything of substance, I believe. So we want to have some kind of meat to this. Instead of just saying, hey, you know, Fairfield, we have this task force. Look at how great we are. Checkpoint, check. That's not essentially what we're here for. I mean, that's not why I'm here. So,
No. And thus, I think the importance of is that my echo? Thus, the importance of this process now is really making sure that it has meat that we all, or teeth, that we all kind of can stand behind, whether or not we agree with each of us agrees with every single point and every sentence and comma, but, you know, being able to turn in something that really feels like, given all that we've learned in the past few months, that it's really going to satisfy some of even what we were talking about at the beginning of this discussion tonight, when Innie shared what she shared, and Doug talking about how people are really looking to this group in the absence of another group that exists. You know, there's clearly a need. And that's why this part does become so important. These next phases become so crucial.
and definitely, look, all of us are over 40. So we've lived a life where we've had to compromise. So we know that none of us, no matter how similar we think we are, going to agree on every single thing. That's just not life. That's not possible. We just have to ensure that it's what is in the best interest of the group, of the town, essentially. And some people may not like it, and that's fine. I may not like it, and it's not about me. It's about what is basically the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and that's what we have to look at. That's the standpoint. And I think we all understand that, you know, being adults, essentially.
You know, I think we've learned some lessons in the past 3 months, and so we incorporate that going forward. You know, we know that, you know, that this is an exercise in just coming up with something that we think is really the best to offer. We can't really focus on how it's going to be received. We just have to focus on making sure it's the best offer that we can put together, knowing what we know, you know, making sure that we've like crossed our T's and dotted our I's and we've thought about it. I think, you know, that's what's great about Doug's suggestion to like add in these implications. So, because that's just another level, and like, we need to just keep thinking like that, you know, and then whatever happens when it's out of our hands happens when it's out of our hands. And, you know, members who are here who want to be on the next task force are going to help take that to the next level. And that's kind of how this all keeps going. But, you know, we build something that the next group can start with, and hopefully avoid some of the things that, you know, that some of our missteps as they go forward.
Anybody have any questions? We're at our, what is this?
Kill niggers, kill black people.
Oh, geez.
Fuck everybody. Fuck the LGBT community. Praise Allah. Kill gays.
Oh,
Shut up, Gina. We can't hear you, nigga. Shut up, nigga. Can't hear you, nigga.
I don't know how to kick this person off.
Gina, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Can you get Kane and Eloise off the call? Get this
I'm
person off the
trying.
call, Nancy.
I am trying. I'm
None of you
trying.
fucking niggers.
Wow. Okay.
Can we, Nancy, let's
I'm
just end. Can we just end and we'll come back? Can we do that?
No, no,
I'm
Sandra, I don't
I'm-
want to end. We're
Okay.
not going to end.
Just him.
Oh,
I'm
We're gonna
trying.
take the
I'm
person off the
trying.
call.
It's not letting
Yes,
me.
you're
I
right.
am trying. I'm
Because-
sorry.
We don't, this is what we are. If anyone had a question, here we are.
Yeah.
And so
Well said,
you
Gina.
don't scare me.
I'm sorry.
You
I'm
don't worry
trying.
me.
I'm sorry.
I don't care about you. You do not hurt me. There's nothing that you can say to me. You're the coward who decided to join our call. So if you don't have anything valid to say, we don't really care.
I've got something valid to say about you. Go out to fucking
I
Africa.
really don't. You don't really matter to us.
Ugh. It's not letting me.
I think this is actually important. Maybe we should let him or her speak.
I think so too, because
I
this
do.
is
I think it's very
recorded.
relevant. It's very relevant. We don't want to shut you out. Speak, because one word is not going to harm us. So what is it that you want to contribute to this group? Cadence.
I'm sorry, but I personally don't think we should entertain that conversation.
I agree. Just end the
Um,
call.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm removing. I'm trying to remove.
Thank you.
No, just end the call.
We can adjourn. We were,
I don't think, let's just have a minute. I'm trying to remove this person because I think it's important that we come together. I am. Okay. Are we?
I don't see them on the call any longer.
You know, so.
Not on the call anymore.
It took me a minute to,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and I have it recorded.
Yeah, so Nancy, this is what it is, right? When the town says there is nothing like that, and when somebody comes in and does this, so we don't need proof. I mean, this whole thing that what are the statistics and what is this? This is what it is. This is exactly what it is. This is what takes away a person's dignity and makes them feel, we choose not to feel that, but this is our constant. This is constant. This is what we live with. Day in and day out, this is what we live with. And the people in this group just got a taste of it right now. But this is our reality. This is our reality.
Yeah. And, you know, I didn't want anyone to say on the call that was uncomfortable, but I am not going to be chased away from this position by someone like that, because I'm not going to give my power over to them. I didn't end the meeting because of it, because that gives them more power than they are entitled to. And I'm not going to, I would never force you to stay on the call if you're uncomfortable, but I need to make sure that that person understood that they are not going to take over the work that we're doing.
Right. And that's what it is. We cannot allow somebody else to take the power over you. And maybe this is what maybe some of you are actually witnessing, where in spite of everything, you stand up and you speak and you're there to listen to everything because you don't want to give the other person that power over you. And that's that dignity. And that cannot be quantified and cannot be narcissistic. This is what we live with. And I am actually really grateful that this call came through and the way Gina handled it and the way we handled, because this is the proof. You know, we talked about stories to be recorded. Well, this is that story. It's not a story. This is our reality.
Doug, you're
And
on
only the
mute.
town officials need to see
Doug,
proof,
you're on mute.
or anybody
Saying
that
this
needs
is
to
actually
see proof that
recorded.
this doesn't happen, they just have to,
This is now part of the record of our meetings. I mean, that was just recorded, so.
I don't even know whether it was sad, Doug. I would not call it sad. It is actually the reality.
It's,
It is our reality.
Annie, I said
It
it,
is,
I simply said it was being recorded, so it's actually a record. It's in the formal record now that this happened.
no, I agree with everything, but the idea that if anyone says this was sad or this is our reality.
I just
More
want to
than
add that
anything, that needs to be accepted. And once we accept that, this is what, people of color live with day in and day out at any point in time. Their sense of being, their sense of dignity is at the hands of someone else. And that's why we don't want to do this. We don't want to give them the power. So that's all. It was just,
I don't accept that, what just happened was shameful to that person. They behaved in a shameful way. I feel no shame whatsoever because I know that, that's not how I live my life. And frankly, those images are part of my history and they make me proud that I am a survivor. So clearly this person got it really, really wrong. But the other thing is, what we stand for is standing up to that. Ultimately, that's why this town needs a task force like this, because we need people who will stand up to that, who will stand and say, I don't accept that as who I want to be and who I think and where I want to live. That's not what I accept. And I'm not going to accept it. And I'm not going to shy away from it. I'm not going to, I didn't want to hang up the call because I'm not going to save them from themselves. Their shame is their shame. And they decided to show it to everybody. They shamed themselves. They didn't shame us.
thank you for that and your strength, because I'm flipping, like shaking. I feel really violated. I feel pissed. I feel embarrassed. I feel sad, and your strength, Gina and Innie, I just want to thank you. It's really cowardly what that person did, but those two people, but I'm like boiling inside. So I appreciate what you're saying, and thank you for your strength, and Bev for.
I want to jump
also-
in. I want to jump in for 1 minute. I think most people will look at this as an outlier, as this person is not well or ill. And most of my experiences as a Black person in different parts of the United States is not the blatancy of that, right? It's always the implicit. It's the being treated as the invisible. It's being looked at as in the abstract. You have the neoliberals that will go on, and many of you are on this call, okay, that will speak about Black experience or non-white experiences in the abstract, at your nice little meetings with everyone white. And you don't engage with a person, especially as a Black person in this country, because as you heard from this call, you didn't make references to other non-whites. It was the N-word, and the images. And so I know there are going to be people here that's going to say, well, no, that's just he's not well, he's ill, that's not reflective of what Fairfield is. And you're right, it's not necessarily reflective. People are not necessarily that blatant. I think that's why Trump is excellent for this country, because he was what a lot of people feel but don't say. He was brave in his own way to be who he is. He was an iteration of America in many ways, but most people, especially in this town of Fairfield, where people are very so-called educated, academia, they're not blatant, but it bites just as much, because it's the not knowing, and it's the treated as if you're not seen as a human being. You're not seen as a person. You're seen as that thing, and so I think that's you know, I don't know if, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure if this particular recording of this person is going to resonate necessarily with the select woman, because I think people can chuck that away as saying, oh, that's just a crazy person. That person's not well. That's not reflective of who I am or who the majority of whites are in this community. Because, you know, obviously he hid behind some, you know, screen name, did not reveal himself. But so therefore he felt that he was brave in being blatant. But I think there's lots of people that live their lives similarly. They just don't speak those words. They just don't incorporate, especially Black people, in their lives. So that's basically, yeah, that's especially in my experience. Listen, I went to law school in Iowa, and I feel my Blackness more in Fairfield, Connecticut than I felt in Iowa City, in Iowa, which is very Caucasian. And I don't mean Mediterranean or Jews. I mean WASP, German, and a lot of Scandinavians. I felt more comfortable with those white women there than I feel in here in Fairfield. So, and that could be partially because it's a college town, but it could be partially also because whites in Iowa, they see a gamut. They see everyone. They see poor. They see violent, because it's very 97% at that time was 97% Caucasian, as opposed to in the Northeast, the people that are associated with violence and poverty are Black and brown. They see everything there, so they understand that they can be in all of those class, as opposed to I feel in the Northeast, and especially in Connecticut here, it's a little place which has a vast amount of disparity. But you know, that's the way it is. You have to go on. You can't let someone make you afraid or stop you. It kind of gives you more ammunition to keep moving and keep excelling. But that's, yeah. That's all I have to say for now.
Beth, thank you. Gina, thank you. Any, thank you. I am very, very lucky to learn from the three of you and to hear from the three of you when we get rocked. You are amazing women, and anyway, proud to be working with you on this. Bev, I'm glad you're here. Any, thank you for kicking this meeting off with, you know, our reminder that violence against anyone in any way, shape, or form is just wrong, and the violence that we just all witnessed, that, you know, is a part of your stories, is wrong. And anyway, thank you for speaking up, because without you, we don't learn. And I love you.
Thank you. And you know what? I mean, I think that you know, this is why we're here. You know, ultimately, you got to see, you know, I would love to tell you that's the first time I heard that word in this town, but it's just not. It's just, my 3-year-old walked up to me on the beach and asked me how to spell it, because somebody called him that first time we were at the beach here. You know, this is where I live. But that is not all. You know, there are lots of other things here, but the work that we're doing has value, because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're making sure that every single person feels as though they are entitled to exist in this space, in the body that they occupy. And you know, this was a thing that happened to me. It does not define me, it defines that person. And I move forward knowing that I have support, and that we're here to support the others who, you know, don't hear it, who don't have someone, who don't feel like they could speak it, who don't, you know, I didn't always have the strength to just speak down someone like that. You know, there was a time when I would have shied away from it, but I don't anymore. That's why I wound up on this task force, I think. And something has happened to me over the past year that has made me even more, my resolve is even firmer, that it's important for us, because it's important that our community understand that if we are going to love each other, that it means that we're going to have to speak over other people who have opinions that they feel are equally valid. You know, I don't wake up every morning and choose to do an activity like that. That's not who I am. Nobody that I know is like that. And so, you know, I hope all walk away with the understanding that like, this does not define me or change me. That person calling me a name that I've heard a million times does not define me. I define me, I choose. And so I choose not to allow it in. And I chose not to end this meeting because I will never let them win. So, but at that point, it is 7:45 and we probably should end the meeting. And you know, not what we want to go out on, but I do actually want to, Riney sent us a link that I wanted to tell everyone about. Nancy, do you have that up? There's an event coming up.
I can share it. I don't have,
Yeah.
Can
you share it? It looks really interesting. It's a webinar. Let me see if I can
It's going
find
to
it.
take a second for me to pull it up. So just hold on.
Me too. I don't know what I do. I don't know where it went. Did I accidentally erase it? I don't know if everyone got it. Let me see.
Keep talking amongst yourselves.
Okay. So on Friday, there is a Planning for Equity Policy Guide, Equity and Policy in Practice, addressing past inequities and planning for the future. So they're talking about how the APA Equity Policy Guide can be, how another town basically used that policy guide to put in their plan that they're adopting this summer. So I'm gonna actually attend it because I think that'll be really helpful for putting together this first iteration. I'll send it around to everyone too, if anyone else wants to sign up for it. I think it looks like an interesting, just another tool that we can use for moving forward.
All right, I'm gonna screen share. Equity, hopefully I'm sharing. This one, is this, do I have the right
Yes,
thing
yeah.
up? Okay. So we'll send the, Gina, you can send the link.
Yeah.
I can put the link in the chat.
Perfect.
It's going to require advanced skills that I may not have at the same time. Hold on. Chat. Did that work? Oh my goodness. Can you see it in the chat?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so maybe just if everybody could pull that off if you're interested, and we can send it around. It'll be in the notes. Anyone else is there anything to add? Thank you all. Okay, Gina, thank you. Innie, Bev, thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Innie for the win. Is there a second?
Yes. Beverly.
Bev, I'll second. All in favor?
Yes.
Okay. Any abstentions or nays? The ayes have it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you
Please
all.
have a safe and healthy evening.
You too. Enjoy. Take care.
Everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.